deep in the mist-shrouded highlands of Papua New Guinea, where ancient valleys cradle secrets older than recorded history, there exists a ritual so extraordinary that it defies every assumption we hold about human dedication and spiritual transformation. Ethnographic records reveal a practice that has remained unchanged for over 1,000 years, where young men sacrifice decades of their lives to grow a single sacred creation from their own bodies. What you are about to discover will challenge everything you believe about human endurance, ancient wisdom, and the lengths to which our species will go to preserve ancestral knowledge. In the remote Tari Valley, hidden from the modern world until 1934, the Huli Wigmen continue a tradition so demanding, so precise, that it has survived colonial invasion, modernization, and the relentless march of globalization. But here's what will leave you questioning the very nature of human consciousness. These men don't just grow hair. They grow their identity, their spiritual power, and their connection to forces that modern science cannot explain. The hair becomes a living extension of their soul, cultivated through rituals that transform not just their appearance, but their entire existence. Survival adaptation data indicates that only cultures facing extreme environmental pressures develop such elaborate initiation processes. The question that haunts anthropologists worldwide is this: what hidden knowledge did the Huli discover about human potential that we have completely forgotten? The journey begins when boys reach the age of 15, at the threshold between childhood and an ancient form of manhood that Western civilization has never understood. These are not ordinary teenagers. Ethnographic evidence shows that only virgin males, untouched by any female presence, can enter what the Huli call the Haroli Bachelor cult school. The selection process itself represents an anthropological anomaly that challenges our understanding of human social structures. Imagine, if you can, a 15-year-old boy making a decision that will consume the next decade of his life. He walks away from his mother, whom he will never touch again. He abandons any possibility of romantic connection, sexual experience, or even casual interaction with the opposite gender. He enters a world where every aspect of his existence becomes focused on a single mystical transformation. Cultural extinction probability shows that such extreme practices typically disappear within 2 generations of outside contact. Yet the Huli have maintained this tradition for centuries, suggesting a survival mechanism so powerful that it transcends normal cultural adaptation patterns. The boys who enter wig school don't just learn to grow hair, they undergo a complete reconstruction of their consciousness, guided by masters who possess what the Huli describe as supernatural abilities to accelerate hair growth through ancient spells and ritualistic practices. These wig masters, known as Daloali, represent living repositories of indigenous survival matrices that have been passed down through countless generations. What happens next defies conventional understanding of human endurance. For 18 months minimum, often extending to 3 years or more, these young men follow a regimen so demanding that it would break most modern individuals within weeks. They rise before dawn, disappearing into the forest to perform cleansing rituals that connect them to spiritual forces residing in rivers, caves, and mountain peaks. 3 times each day, without exception, they must wet their hair with holy water while chanting spells that have remained unchanged for a millennium. This isn't simple grooming. Anthropological research indicates that these water rituals create a meditative state that alters brain chemistry and establishes profound connections between the individual and their ancestral knowledge systems. The sleeping arrangement alone reveals the extraordinary discipline required for this transformation. Each night, these young men must sleep on their backs, their necks resting on wooden supports that elevate their heads to prevent any distortion of their growing hair. As the hair increases in volume, the wooden bars are raised higher, creating increasingly uncomfortable sleeping positions that would challenge the endurance of trained athletes. But perhaps most revealing of all is the dietary restriction system that governs every meal, every bite, every nutritional choice for years. The initiates cannot consume pig heart or fat, cannot eat spicy foods, and must follow nutritional guidelines that suggest ancient understanding of how specific foods affect hair growth and spiritual development. This represents an indigenous knowledge system that predates modern nutrition science by thousands of years. Cultural adaptation mechanisms reveal something even more startling about Huli society. The separation between men and women isn't just traditional gender roles. The Huli believe that women possess supernatural abilities that can literally drain masculine energy, steal spiritual power, and contaminate the sacred process of wig creation. This isn't misogyny as we understand it, but rather a survival strategy based on beliefs about invisible forces that govern human vitality. Ancient oral traditions suggest that this belief system developed as a response to environmental pressures that force the Huli to maximize every advantage in their struggle for survival. By creating absolute separation between male and female energies during critical development periods, they believe they can concentrate and amplify masculine power to levels impossible under normal circumstances. As months pass in the Bachelor schools, something extraordinary begins to emerge. The hair doesn't just grow randomly. Using circular bamboo bands, the masters gradually shape each young man's hair into a distinctive mushroom formation that resembles ancient ceremonial headpieces found in cultures across the globe. This shaping process represents a form of living sculpture that transforms the human head into a sacred artistic creation. Ritualistic symbiosis between the growing hair and the developing consciousness creates what anthropologists describe as an altered state of identity. The young men report feeling their hair as an extension of their spiritual body, a living antenna that connects them to ancestral spirits and natural forces invisible to ordinary perception. After 18 months of this demanding discipline, a moment arrives that marks one of the most dramatic transitions in human cultural experience. The hair is cut away completely, shaved close to the scalp, in a ritual that symbolizes death and rebirth. But this isn't an ending. It's a beginning. The harvested hair becomes raw material for the wigmaster, who weaves it into traditional Huli headpieces that serve different purposes in tribal life. Everyday wigs allow men to navigate normal social interactions while maintaining their spiritual identity. Ceremonial wigs, adorned with parrot feathers and red ochre pigments, transform the wearer into a living embodiment of ancestral power during sacred festivals and warfare rituals. What modern observers often miss is the economic dimension of this cultural practice. These wigs represent stored wealth, spiritual capital that can be traded, sold, or gifted within complex social networks. A man who has grown multiple wigs possesses not just personal spiritual power, but tangible assets that establish his position within tribal hierarchy. Genetic isolation coefficients indicate that the Huli have maintained distinct cultural practices precisely because of their geographic separation from outside influences. Living in valleys surrounded by treacherous mountain terrain, they developed survival strategies that maximize their adaptation to specific environmental conditions while preserving ancient knowledge systems that connect them to their ancestral heritage. The warrior dimension of Huli culture adds another layer to this mysterious practice. Ethnographic data reveals that the elaborate wigs serve practical purposes during warfare, creating intimidating silhouettes that psychologically unsettle enemies while providing spiritual protection through ancestral connections. The young men who complete wig school aren't just spiritually transformed individuals. They become weapons of psychological warfare, living symbols of tribal power and cultural continuity. Archaeological evidence suggests that similar hair-growing traditions existed throughout the Pacific region thousands of years ago, but only the Huli have preserved the complete knowledge system in its original form. This makes them living guardians of ancient human practices that could hold keys to understanding our species' forgotten capabilities. The most disturbing aspect of this tradition, from a modern perspective, is its sustainability crisis. As younger generations encounter Western education, technology, and different lifestyle opportunities, fewer boys choose to enter the traditional wig schools. Cultural preservation experts estimate that this practice could disappear entirely within 2 generations unless dramatic intervention occurs. But here's what makes the Huli tradition truly extraordinary. Those who complete the full cycle report experiencing consciousness states that modern psychology cannot explain. They describe enhanced intuition, supernatural awareness of environmental changes, and communication abilities with natural forces that sound like fantasy to Western ears, but represent documented experiences within Huli cultural context. Indigenous survival matrices embedded in this practice suggest that the Huli discovered something profound about human potential that our technologically advanced civilization has completely overlooked. The combination of physical discipline, spiritual practice, dietary control, and social isolation creates conditions that may actually unlock dormant capabilities within human consciousness. Anthropological anomalies continue to emerge from ongoing research with the Huli. Men who have completed multiple wig cycles demonstrate enhanced pattern recognition, improved environmental sensitivity, and social leadership abilities that suggest the practice creates measurable changes in cognitive function and emotional development. The vengeance culture that governs Huli society adds yet another dimension to understanding why such extreme initiation practices evolved. In a world where tribal warfare could erupt without warning, where individual actions could trigger conflicts lasting generations, the ability to produce warriors with exceptional mental discipline and spiritual power became a survival necessity rather than cultural luxury. Contemporary Huli Wigmen, who interact with modern researchers, consistently emphasize that outsiders cannot understand the true purpose of their practices because the explanations require cultural context that takes decades to develop. They speak of connections to ancestral spirits, communication with natural forces, and awareness of invisible energies that govern human existence. What emerges from deep ethnographic study is a picture of human adaptation that challenges every assumption about primitive versus advanced cultures. The Huli have developed technologies of consciousness that may represent evolutionary capabilities our species possessed before civilization directed human development along different pathways. The pig-based economy that supports Huli culture demonstrates another aspect of their survival wisdom. These animals serve as living banks, reproduction units, and spiritual sacrifices that maintain complex social relationships while providing protein in an environment where other food sources remain unreliable. The integration of economic, spiritual, and nutritional functions within a single cultural practice reveals sophisticated understanding of systemic survival strategies. As global climate change threatens traditional environments worldwide, indigenous survival knowledge becomes increasingly valuable for understanding how human communities can adapt to rapidly changing conditions. The Huli tradition of wig growing represents just one example of cultural practices that encode survival information in forms that transcend individual lifespans. The question that haunts researchers who study the Huli is whether these practices activate genetic potentials that remain dormant in modern humans. Could the combination of physical discipline, spiritual focus, and cultural immersion actually trigger evolutionary capabilities that our ancestors possessed but contemporary civilization has suppressed? Recent neurological research suggests that extreme meditative practices can create measurable changes in brain structure and function. The Huli wig growing tradition represents one of the most demanding meditation practices documented in anthropological literature, maintained continuously for periods that exceed most monastic disciplines. What you have witnessed here represents more than cultural curiosity or anthropological documentation. The Huli Wigmen preserve knowledge systems that could hold keys to understanding human potential that our species desperately needs as we face unprecedented global challenges. Their tradition forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about what we have sacrificed in exchange for technological advancement. While we have gained the ability to communicate instantly across vast distances, have we lost the capacity to communicate with natural forces that govern our existence? While we have developed artificial intelligence, have we forgotten how to develop our own consciousness? The young men who dedicate decades of their lives to growing sacred wigs aren't primitive holdovers from an outdated past. They are guardians of human capabilities that our civilization has forgotten how to access. Their sacrifice preserves not just cultural heritage, but potentially crucial survival knowledge that our species may need as we navigate an uncertain future. In the misty highlands of Papua New Guinea, where ancient valleys still echo with ancestral wisdom, the Huli Wigmen continue their sacred practice. Each young man who enters the Bachelor school carries forward a tradition that connects us to aspects of human consciousness that remain unexplored by modern science. Their hair grows not just as personal transformation, but as living proof that human beings possess potentials far beyond anything our contemporary understanding can explain. In a world increasingly dominated by artificial intelligence and technological solutions, perhaps the most important discoveries about human capability still wait to be rediscovered in the ancient practices of those who never forgot who we really are. The Huli Wigmen remind us that true human advancement might not lie in external technologies, but in the courageous exploration of consciousness capacities that have always existed within us, waiting for the discipline, dedication, and wisdom